Thank you so much for coming to this panel. Hope you're all enjoying the day, and welcome to the Service Design Excellence in Government panel. Yay, service design. I'm Marissa Bernstein. I'll be the moderator for this session. I manage Code for Canada's Toronto-based programs, Civic Hall and GRIT. So come talk to me after if you want to learn more about those programs. And as Code for Canada's inclusive usability testing service, managing GRIT has put me in contact with a lot of service designers. So I've gotten to see really how important thoughtful user-centered design is, especially when users are residents, and even more so when they're from vulnerable communities. So how do you do that well? How do you put users at the center of your design process in meaningful, respectful ways? Well, we're very fortunate to have three extraordinary public servants here today who are experts on delivering on that promise daily, and it's a privilege to introduce them. So we'll hear three fantastic presentations, and then if there's time, we'll do a bit of a Q&A, so make note of any questions you may have. All right, let's get started. So, Doug, can you grab this? First up is Clementine Hahn. Hopefully that accent is okay. There we go. Clementine studied public and political communication at Sciences Po France, and then worked at Bordeaux University Hospital managing e-health studies. From there, she created a nonprofit organization with two engineers where the team used innovative tech to improve public services, and more specifically, to deliver tools to help public organizations be more transparent about their finances. After moving to Canada, Clementine became a product manager with the CRA. So Clementine, come on up.
Where's my presentation?
Just click.
Yeah, that's me.
That should have been it.
Bonjour. Bon, je m'appelle Clementine Hahn. I'm Clementine, and I'm a product manager at CDS. So I'm not a designer. I will try to make justice to the incredible work that all the team put together the last 14 months working at CDS with CRA, Canada Revenue Agency. Three quick things about me to set some context. So I'm French from France, so please, if there's any weird language or wording you don't understand, bear with me and ask your questions afterwards. I'm new to Canada, so I'm also new to Gov. I'm new to many cultural things that I learned pretty quickly working with CDS and Canada Revenue Agency. And I'm distributed. I work out of Montreal. During the time we worked together, 2/3 of the team was based in Ottawa and 1/3 was based in Toronto. And I was the only one out of Montreal. As a consequence, communication was really important. Not in my language, not in my country, no one in the same room, and trying to work with CRA. So communication is really important. But to do what, you ask? We partnered with CRA in order to try to propose a new service to help people in low-income situation to file their taxes in order to access their benefits. Let me elaborate a little bit on that. I realized, and you all already know, how much not fun it is to file your taxes here. It requires time and resources, and you will maybe hire an accountant, you will maybe go to H&R Block or pay for a tax software, or you will maybe spend a lot of time to ask your sister, your parents, or the uncle you never talked to, can you please help me file my taxes? If you are in a vulnerable situation or you experience low income, you don't have the luxury to do all that. So maybe you will not file your taxes, and certainly you will not get the benefits you are already entitled to. CRA is really aware of that, and it's trying to work on that. And one of those programs to try to improve this situation is called the CVITP, the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program. So those are tax clinics where you can come and you have volunteers really welcoming you and do a really nice interview process to help you file your taxes. And they're not going to ask you, are you eligible for that credit? Or do you know which 12 line 14 AB you need to cross, because no one knows. They will ask you, do you have children? Did you live in that city? Like human question based. And that works really well. But there's a problem. Those are physical places. And Canada is big, also you already know that. And also tax season, that is now, happens to be in March, and March is in winter, is in Canada. So you have so many reasons for what accessing those physical places can be complicated. Maybe you don't have transportation, maybe you don't own a car, maybe there's nothing and you live in a remote area. So how do we do? We work on trying to design a service that would be accessible online and on paper that would mimic that interview process, meaning give you questions you can actually answer to file your taxes. I could talk about many things in our journey to try to design this service and trying to prototype and deliver it. I'm going to talk about a tiny bit of it, which is the authentication part. And from the beginning, we said we were going to crack the authentication nut because we knew that it was going to be complicated, to say the least. If you're in person, you can give an ID. If you have my account, you can already authenticate yourself. But we need something quick, something easy, but something secure enough. And when you think about authentication, you need to think about the two sides of the story. Maybe the one that is the more obvious about is it has to be secure. CRA needs to be sure you are who you say you are, and no one else is actually using the service fraudulently with another name. So that's the first piece of it. But the second part of it that you never have to forget is from a tax filer perspective, scam are a thing, another thing I learned. And also someone told me, you're not truly Canadian if you did not receive a fraudulent call from someone pretending to be CIA and be like, you need to call us right back. I finally received that call, so I'm almost Canadian now. And that is really important. And you may have the best authentication process so well designed in the world. If it doesn't seem legit, if it seems or smells fraudulent, tax filers are very aware, especially if they are vulnerable. They will not even start the authentication process. They need to protect themselves. So we need to think about those both sides. We have so many talented people in the team and so many passionate public servants with CRA. We had an incredible team. So I'm not going to insist that much on the tools, the technology, all the fancy things. Like, we did the job, that's the job. And we had some good artifacts that I can show you. I'm going to talk to you more about how it is essential to build trust if you want that design to go somewhere and to be approved. So, again, technology was not the problem. Being able to access the backend, to check the scene, the name, the date of birth, whatever you want, have a design that is light, joyful, welcoming, but serious, all that is not a problem. All that we know that's how to do. And let me show you. So we propose a light authentication flow in order to have people being comfortable to do that quickly and easily. How did that work? Eligible tax filer would receive a paper, an access letter in the mail. Why in the mail when you're talking about an online service, you may ask? Well, it's because anything that doesn't come in a brown envelope will be thrown away or considered scam by all the people we met, and we met 82 of them. So we needed to start with a paper letter. And on this paper letter, we put an access code, a personal access code. So then you go on the website and you put your access code. If it's good, you can put your social insurance number. And if it's good, you can put your date of birth. And then you're logged in. It seems easy. It seems possible. It is feasible, technically. And it was a good solution, so what's the problem? We needed someone to say yes. And I think you all know how that is difficult. It was not life-changing. It was not impossible to put in place. Technologically, it's pretty easy to do. The only thing, it was never been done. It was only 3 steps. It was really easy. How can we allow that? Yes, but that's the point. The thing is that we also are very thoughtful about, we don't want to create security issues. We want to be careful about the fraudulence. So we did some trade-off. This was an easy process, but by filing using this authentication flow, you didn't see all the nitty-gritty information. You were seeing only things that would allow you to file. You would not see your income information in details, nothing too precise. So we were not allowing fraud to happen with this light authentication process. So we thought about it. And we thought about it because we had so many people from CRA onboarded with the team, and we had so many conversations. So it was secure, but still, no one was saying, yes, you can pilot your thing with that. But as everyone here, we are on a mission, we are passionate, we want that to work, so we took our backpack and continued the conversation again and again. And we were like, okay, this is going to happen. Because we met the people at the tax clinic, at the food bank, and we saw people, like one day, one man told me, you know, young lady, I don't use a computer. I need someone to do my taxes. And I was like, yes, please, you're the person, I want you to try the service. And he did it, and it was slow, but he did it. And at the end, he was like, I can use a computer. And you just file your taxes. I just filed my taxes. Yes, that's what we're trying to do. And he felt autonomy, he felt pride, and this is what we wanted to do. So we were determined. So we wanted to meet CRA where they were. And CRA, as you may know, is an organization of 46,000 people. So we went through a lot of calls, of meetings, of back and forth email, you know, the kind of email that you start to have 65 replies and counting, and it's going again and again. We went through their own security assessment framework. We onboarded an authentication expert within the CDS team, trying to have more buy-in. We did all the things. And nothing worked. Nothing worked. And we had no red flags. Every time we were talking to someone, it was like, yeah, that would work from a security point of view. That would work from a legislation, maybe change that comma from one line, but that would work. There was no red flags, there was no problem, and still we had no agreement. So we had feelings as a product team, a lot. One of the product manager role is to keep the morale a bit. That was a little bit challenging at the time, I must say. We was frustrating. We couldn't figure out what was missing. The thing is, they had feelings too. And when I say they, it's a little bit difficult to say who those many, many people in CRA we were asking the approval to, but they were not a part of the product team. And we were asking them to say yes to something where there's maybe so much at risk. There's the tax filer confidence, there's their security about their information, there's the reputation of CRA. And we ask them to say yes, of course they are uncomfortable, of course it's complicated, and there's so many people that should say yes. So, never forget the both sides of the equation when you think about trust. We were super trustful about our solution. They were not. So we did something super techy, innovative. We just put everyone in the same room at the same time. Good old things. But we did that in a specific way. In the morning, we gathered all the research, all the insights, all the quotes, all the artifacts that we built, and also all the constraints from CRA, their own perspective, their own solution. We focused the morning on that, and on the afternoon, we printed out giant user flow, and we asked all the teams to express pain points from a CRA perspective and from a tax filer perspective. And at the end, something different happened. Why is that? Because we created momentum. We had 30 people from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's an entire day for a dozen of services within CRA. Just finding the right room was a mess. I don't know if you imagine how hard was that. We had the DG for digital services to open and close the day. That gives buy-in. That gives like everyone in the room, this is happening, and we're going to have something by the end of the day, and this is okay, so please come up with solution. We had people that never talked to each other in real life before sitting in the same room. They were in the same email than us for 6 months. They are working in the same services at CRA. They never met each other in real life. That happened that day. And they were heard. So again, super techy, innovative things. We put sticky notes on the whiteboards. But what changed everything is that we came to the decision-making process all together with people that were answering the phone to tax filers, to DG and executive and manager, everyone at the same level. We brought back that process to owning the results and to be confident about it. At the end of the day, the DG closed and say, okay, and spoiler alert, there's still so many things to solve. We didn't solve all the authentication for CRA, like that was not the goal. We needed something that would be comfortable to pilot. And the DG say, it will be good enough. I don't know if you imagine, but that was my inner state. It's been 6 months. I was like, I just needed that. I needed that, it is good enough. And so many people in the room heard that yes. So what was different is that we created momentum. We built a safe space without blame. We allowed crazy ideas to be said without any sanction, without any love, without you're going to be pointed at because it was never done before. We wanted those crazy ideas. And we put someone that has the authority and the accountability to say yes. We put it in front of the researcher, the designer, the people that answer the phone at CRA, and everyone heard that it was okay. So, little conclusion, you know, sometimes you're like, hey, another meeting that could have been an email. So many of those emails should have been a meeting in the first place in our situation. And as I know I'm already out of time, I'm just going to finish. We were a little bit afraid that we are going to not leave good results of that. We created a report, and we really paid attention that it was framed. If you're not familiar with CRA, maybe you don't know, but this is the typical design of all the CRA reports, and it was redacted by our colleague at CRA. So now our little fun workshop when we order pizza and had a DG say yes to a crazy idea is a legit report within CRA where the conclusion lies in. So it becomes something other team can rely on. So it was a little tiny precedent, but we created a precedent, and there's an evidence of it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Clementine. All right. Up next, we have Safiah Chowdhury. Safiah is a policy development officer working in social policy, program, and service design for the City of Toronto. Her focus is poverty reduction. She's also involved with a few grassroots community groups and previously worked at the Mars Discovery District. Altogether, Safiah has an eclectic, seemingly disconnected background and range of interests. Same. Come on up.
Hi, everyone. So, fun fact about government is that a lot of our reports come in the format of a slide deck. So as a result of that, it may be a little text heavy compared to some of the other presentations. And the title, of course, is very bureaucratic because I had to go through many approval processes to get this deck to get here today. So distributing agency to improve public services, just to way of saying what does it look like to share power in order to improve the experience for residents. So just some context, I presently, this week is my last week, but I work at Employment and Social Services, TESS. And TESS is the municipal service agency for social assistance in Ontario. So we provide Ontario Works. Social assistance is the word for welfare. And in Toronto, there are 110,000 cases that we served in 2018, which represents close to 200,000 residents. And these are low-income individuals, people who have assets that are less than $10,000. And if you're a single person on OW in Toronto, you're earning $700 a month for food and shelter and living costs. So we serve a population that is in critical need of services. And 90% of our staff are operational front-facing staff. So that's support assistants, admin assistants, caseworkers, supervisors. And so given the scale of our operations, delivering excellent public services fundamentally requires that our frontline staff are well equipped. Because as we know, people don't necessarily care about policies. It's about how they feel when accessing a service, especially for a population that is as underserved as the people on social assistance in Toronto. It's a highly, highly regulated space. So we function in a system that is regulated by the province of Ontario in the mid-90s, which some people were not born then. And these regulations take effect in the 21st century. It is hierarchical because in a system where you are serving people who are precarious, it's really important that there's clear lines of accountability because these systems are often scrutinized. We know low-income individuals, and we know especially people on social assistance are not necessarily considered to be important factors in a lot of political discourse. As a result, there's a lot of risk aversion, tremendous risk aversion, and it's a very, very large system. The mayor once said that TESS is the third largest social service system in Canada, which I'm not necessarily sure about, but I'm repeating his words. And so when I say large, I mean large is effectively a euphemism for lots and lots of inertia. And so so how do you do good public service work in a system that is as such? And when we have limited control over policies and political changes, the role of service delivery becomes even more critical because there is a way to instigate change from the perspective of delivery to then influence political and policy changes. So in terms of Ontario Works, again, social assistance in Toronto, we see that 85%, we have our own systems of capturing information, of course, and so 85% report at least one barrier. The exits for employment, the monthly average is 13%. The average length of stay for people on social assistance in Toronto is 42.7 months. That's over 2 years. And that is despite the fact that most of our metrics, most of the things that we're accountable to, most of our reporting to the province, most of our reporting to the media is all about employment. If you've ever heard any discourse about social assistance, if you've ever heard any discourse about welfare, it's we need to get them a job. But it's clear through our casework that most people on social assistance are not in fact employable. So in a system that only really values employment outcomes, what does it look like to serve a population that is in critical need of services? And how can we start doing this work to perhaps show that we need to start thinking less about employment and more about maybe employability? So enter something called innovative case management. It was originally called intensive case management, but then I reworked the I to mean innovative. So this is about how do we advance new approaches to working. So what does it even look like to serve people differently? If we are an administrative system that refers people and process their payments, what does it look like to work collaboratively with individuals? How can we engage new stakeholders beyond maybe traditional employment service providers? Address system level gaps. If we have a lot of employment programs, what about, again, the life stabilization needs of people? We have people who have intense social anxiety. We have people who have addictions. We have people who have intergenerational poverty. What does it look like to address those gaps? How can we use new partnerships to do that? How can we deliver service in a way that meets the needs of people beyond them coming in between 8:30 and 4:30? And then provide opportunities for not only residents, clients who receive social assistance, but also staff. So through the innovative case management approach, the ICM approach, we had 13, we started working on this in 2017. We had 13 unique division-wide pilots, and these are just a few examples of them. The lessons are scaled. Many of the fundamental purpose always was about learning. And some of these learnings have been scaled to 7 different initiatives. About 4 of them are now funded externally entirely. And the thing about them is that there's many, many success stories, and each pilot could have its own presentation, truly. But the important thing was that it was never easy. So for example, our handbook, we have a handbook written by clients to other clients about what it means to be on social assistance. It took 24 months, 2 years for my system to adopt that. And so a lot of times it requires patience and fortitude and a lot of bureaucratic resiliency. And each year we spent about $400,000 on these pilots. They're all collaborative. They recognize that traditional approaches may not be appropriate. So a lot of it was creating a new relationship between government and service agencies to do this work. So we have things like population-specific programs in growth industries, focusing, and we have things about if you've ever gone through the addiction system, it really underserves people who are low income. So how can we create kind of a safety net for them? Having more traditional-based work. There's a number of clear gaping holes in this social service system, and it's not actually very challenging to figure out what to do in those instances because the holes are so manifest. And so it was really a matter of asking people on the ground, people on the front lines, what does it look like to address this service gap, and then how can we work together to do this? And I learned a lot about, in fact, what is possible. But then the question was, why is it always head office? As I mentioned, over 90% of our staff are frontline operational staff. They're unionized. So why is less than 10% of the division the ones creating these pilots and kind of doing this fun, innovative work? The idea is that, there's space to think and develop. There's context in terms of we have access to the data. We know the system well. We have requisite skills like project management and analysis and that kind of thing, and we can leverage relationships. So then it was, well, how can we engage operational staff who must respond to urgent client needs? There's many, many instances of a newcomer family who arrive, the first point of arrival is at an OW office, and they need to receive immediate services. Ooh, I have 5 minutes. Okay, so how do we empower operational staff? How do we involve them? How do we ultimately empower them? So in year one, which was 2017, through engagement, we just made the opportunity available. We said, hey, staff and offices, do you have any ideas? We had, a little bit of take-up. A few offices participated. Then in year two, we specifically we went out to individual offices and said, do you have any ideas? We leveraged kind of the hierarchy to do that, and then we had a few more offices participate. But then ultimately, we wished to empower the staff by inviting them to actively participate as designers themselves in the process, and as a result, we had effectively all the offices participate. So if we're thinking about it in kind of mean terms, not involving staff, asking staff their opinions, asking staff for their ideas, and then ultimately staff being able to understand and act on their own agency. And from a management point of view, it's management makes all the decisions, staff kind of just implement it. Management asks staff for their thoughts to inform the design. Management encourages staff, and then management actively creates staff. Because we know that things live and die in implementation. Having the people who are doing the implementation work being active parts is very enlightened. How do you do this enlightenment work? Well, first we had a design jam, and I ran through a very, very, very traditional design jam. We did stakeholder mapping, journey mapping. It was a design charrette. We had a lot of sticky notes. We had people walking around the room, and all with caseworkers. And the things that I heard afterwards through the exit survey was, oh, it was inspirational, it was motivational, we loved it. It was a great opportunity. But then for those individuals who actually went on to then go design their pilots, these same individuals, what did they say? They said it was too structured, it was abstract, it was unclear, and it didn't help with ideas. So there was an obvious disjuncture between the design jam and what actually ended up happening when it came to designing a program. What I did hear a lot of was, what am I allowed to do? Who's accountable for this? Am I going to get in trouble? Are people going to be upset with me? Are you sure I'm not going to get in trouble? Because ultimately it was never about not having ideas. It was never about that. It was always about having agency. And what's interesting is you would think these questions came from the staff, the operational staff, the unionized staff who are kind of in the bottom of the hierarchy, but it also came from management. And so when we think of a traditional management structure, we have senior management who set the direction and the discretion, they approve the pilots. We have local office management who advise on the parameters, they support design implementation. We have all the frontline staff who design the pilots. There's a lead which is me, who just suggests the approach, support design and implementation. And it was really important for us to have delineated roles. So when we're thinking about more of a more distributed approach, what is everybody's specific role and how can we define that? We have to make sure to approach the hierarchy in a way that the hierarchy is comfortable without threatening it. So what is it? So that fundamentally requires people to understand where their place is in this and what are the opportunities for creativity within a non-threatened hierarchy. So in the end, it was championed and endorsed by everybody and encouraged and loved by management because they were considered to be the agents of change. They wanted to be respected by their staff. They wanted to be considered to be agents of change for their staff. So ultimately, it didn't really look like a hierarchy. It was more like a collective, a circle, because everybody felt very accountable towards each other, and that's often how it works in operational spaces. So it's always about stakeholder mapping. So in the end, when we had 19 pilots last year, some of the service level improvements, this is just a literally list of the service level improvements that occurred from front lines. And it led to really, really, really cool work, really important work. One small pilot is there's a lot of internationally trained newcomers who are living in our shelter system. So what does it look like to provide targeted support to that specific population group with their unique needs and supports to get them out into the workforce or to get them access to more services, and all of them are now housed. And so one thing to stress is that there's lots and lots of daily innovation and service improvements in the public service. It happens every day. As I mentioned, we work in a system that has gaping holes, that is highly regulated, and people are doing really important work. It's often challenging to ever speak about that work. And it's really hard to get it airtime. And the learnings that we received from our staff were, in the end, the exact same learnings that we had when we ran it from head office. All the learnings apply to each other. But the interesting thing was, it cost much less. And the staff are used to working in a constrained environment. It cost a lot less, and the ratio of people served was much greater. And so when we think about kind of the space to think, context, skills, leveraging relationships, it was really important to ensure that all of it became distributed, to have distributed power, to have distributed risk, to have distributed agency, and to have distributed innovation. And since we've done this, I've received a lot of feedback from staff, and they have tremendous process improvements. You know, I know what I'm going to do for 2020. But the most important thing is that staff who previously felt stuck are now empowered themselves to be change agents. They learn how to advance ideas in a system that is otherwise very, very rigid to serve the people that they see every day. And in the absence of policy, as I mentioned, in the absence of policy or political changes, it is very important that these service level changes happen. And the fear of change management is often, when we think about change management and the fear of it, it's often because of people are scared of how it will be perceived by operations. But then what does it mean? What does it look like when operations themselves are the change managers? And so we think about, we serve people with significantly less cost, created precedent. This was really important, creating precedent, created opportunities for system improvements, and we provided safe examples of change management. And now the province of who regulates us, we're in active conversations about them as to what it looks like to provide life stabilization supports in addition to the employment supports. And because we are the direct service delivery agents, we're also in the capacity, we're in the capacity of measuring what that looks like, because we know what employment outcomes look like. Did you get a job? What is your income? Are you on social assistance? Yes or no? But what does life stabilization metrics look like? Has your self-worth increased? Are you showering now for some people? Have you accessed any anger management classes? Those kinds of things. And we're in a space to measure that, which can then instigate more change that changes the overall policy framework under which we exist. And I was thinking, okay, well, what are the takeaways for an audience about this small approach? And I was really truly thinking about it, but I'm often caught up in the mechanics of day-to-day work, and it's hard to put your head above water and realize, what are the lessons. And from that itself, I think there's lessons, because sometimes it's just a matter of doing the work. And it's hard to see the lessons. And there's a lot of problem areas that I need to improve. But ultimately, it's always about relationships and agency. It's less about design methodology and tools and fundamentally about this. And how do we cultivate relationships and agency? We have to speak to people's incentives, speak to staff incentives, speak to management incentives, which are so important. And oftentimes they're the same incentive, and they just need to be framed in reciprocity of each other. leveraging the structure, again, not threatening the hierarchy, but using it to create almost make somebody else accountable to the point that we're all accountable. And a lot of people didn't know that was happening, but it is ultimately what happened. So, for example, a staff person would ask, can I do this? And I would say, what has your manager said? The manager would say, what did the director say? The director would say, what does the staff person want to do? I'm the person who's in contact with all of them, and I told them all that they all said yes. So as a result of that, we got a yes. And that's often how it works. So leveraging the structure to do this, redefining specialization, making project management tools available. Staff are designers. Clients, people who receive social assistance, are also designers. They are supports. Moving away from that depravity mindset where they only need to receive, but they're also in such an important role of also giving. So leveraging the supports that they can provide one another. Community groups also as a way of absorbing risk. So sometimes we didn't want to do something because we're scared of what it looks like when we have a program that is specifically targeted to a population group, say individuals who have experience in the criminal justice system, but the community agency has no problem with it. And so if that's the only client group they serve, then as a result, we're forced to then specifically address that group. So community groups are also in a position to absorb risk. Establishing precedents, and it's really, really important that every single small precedent matters. So if we get somebody random to spend $300 on a pizza lunch, that's an important precedent, because what that now means is that we can use money to support clients for food in a way maybe we weren't able to do before, which then just opens up the possibility of more funding opportunities. And then be patient and honoring every win. Every win matters. Every win matters when it comes to direct client service. So when you have 100% of participation, that's a win that needs to be honored. When you have staff who have never participated in a work outside of their core mandate, participating, that's a huge win. When you get one director, maybe who's more reticent or uncomfortable with change, to speak at an event, that's a huge win. And every single one of these wins needs to be honored. And ultimately, together, when it's distributed and everybody understands their various different roles, it's possible to improve services, which ideally will improve the lives of our most vulnerable people. Thank you.
Thanks, Safiah. That was awesome. All right, last up we have Kelsey Singbeil. I'm just mispronouncing everyone's name, sorry. Kelsey helps government teams better understand the needs of British Columbians and then design and deliver government services that meet them. She's a designer and communicator with a background in public engagement and social change and has worked with public, private, and nonprofit organizations over the last 10 years. Come on up.
All right. Hi, everybody. So as she mentioned, my name is Kelsey. I'm a director with a service design team in the government of British Columbia. And what that means is I work with a team of designers and developers. There's about 10 of us, and we work in government to really change how government works. So really trying to embed a user-centered approach to the design and delivery of government services. So our team has kind of 3 pillars. We focus on training and capacity building, so we run training and workshops for public servants. We also have design foundations, so those are things like building out a design system or user research guide, so tools that other public servants can use to then kind of leverage in their own design practices. And then we also run service delivery projects, so that's where we partner with ministries and partner with program areas to really kind of work with them over 3 to 9 months, more or less. And so similar to kind of what Clementine did, where you're working with a partner, you're bringing a design approach to it, so you're kind of working through what a design kind of led approach would be to understanding and discovering user needs, working through kind of exploring and experimenting and prototyping new ideas, and then ultimately trying to actually implement those ideas at the end of the day. And so within that kind of context of service delivery, these are some of the things that our team is really grappling with around how do we actually contribute to making change and improving public services. So we really think about the approach that we take. And so, it's not just about really thinking about our model and how do we actually partner to both kind of change and end up with a good product at the end of the day, but also increase the capacity of the teams that we work with so that they're working in a different way. And then when we talk about diversity and inclusion, how do we ensure that public services and that our approach to designing public services represents British Columbians and represents the people who actually use those services? And then at the end of the day, are we actually implementing anything? So it's great to go to user research and it's great to kind of prototype a whole bunch of new ideas and to learn a lot more, but does anything actually change on the ground? And historically, our team has done a lot of really great user research and come up with a lot of ideas, but we have been challenged to get to implementation. So we're trying to kind of diversify our team and get more developers on our team and change our structure and change our approach in order to get there. But that's something that we continue to kind of grapple with is how do we actually move to real change? So I'm going to speak to a project that we recently worked on that kind of highlights some of those challenges and some of those things that we've been thinking about lately. And that's centered around changing your name. So quick poll, I just wanted to know, has anybody actually changed their name in the audience? Okay, not very many of you, wow. So changing your name is actually a fairly complicated process. So in British Columbia, about 6,000 people a year go through changing your name. And those are people of all ages, those are individuals, those are parents, those are people that may be changing their name because they got divorced and they want to change back to their maiden name. Those are people that may be transitioning genders and want to change their name in that circumstance. Those are people that, maybe their name was incorrect on their immigration papers or on other identity papers, and they just actually want to have the correct foundational identity. Those are people, some people are born in BC, some people are born in another province or another country. Sometimes their documents and their foundational identity documents are in a different language, or they can't get them because they left them behind. So these are people that are from all incomes, all living situations, have varying access to supports and resources. And these are people that, set out to, some people are very ambitious, they're like, I want to change my name. And some people are kind of put in a corner where they're like, I need to travel next month, and my identity doesn't match up, and I need to renew my passport, and my name's not right. How am I going to do this? So when you think about wanting to change your name, there's kind of that awareness of, okay, there's actually a legal name change process. There's something I actually have to go do. And oh, great, there's an application. In this instance, there's an 11-page form that you have to fill out. And so, okay, I need to actually submit my application. And then you need to submit that for processing. So on the staff side, they receive that application and they need to go through that form and check to see that you've entered all that right information. As a citizen, you're waiting and hoping that your form is getting processed. And at the end of the day, that you're going to receive a certificate. And so what that certificate is actually just saying that you have legally changed your name. It doesn't actually update any of your documents. So you then need to go and update your passport, and then you then need to go and update your driver's license. So it's a bit of a misconstrued kind of conception of what you're actually going to get at the end of the process. You want to change your name, you want to change your identity, you want to change your legal documents, but really you're just getting the certificate that says you are able to go do those things. And so a quote from somebody that we spoke with was, I assumed that once I did the legal name change, it updated everything else. When I went to renew my passport later, I found out it didn't. My name was only updated in BC. So this is the legal name change application. So on the left, you have a very complicated form. On the right, you have a very simple online form that is only applicable for certain circumstances. So there's a difference when you change your name if you are applying as an adult versus if you're applying with children or on behalf of children. So thinking about you're wanting to change the names of your children because you're recently divorced. And so what does that process look like? So there's different types of forms for different scenarios. You have to determine which scenario you're in. If you're only an adult, then you can use the online. If you're not, you can't. So it's quite complicated. And we worked with the Ministry of Health in BC to really understand and think about how might we improve the legal name change process. And so that experience for applicants, but also on the staff side, how could we reduce errors? So we found that usually, 20% of applications had errors. If your application had an error, you were taking about 8 to 9 weeks for it to be processed, and that for those people that were applying, if they had 3 errors, that could be up to 12 weeks, so up to 3 months to go through this process. And that also the teams that were, or the people that were applying that had the most challenge were those that were getting divorced, or those that were coming from a divorce situation. So really understanding who were making those errors, and who had the most barriers to accessing the service. So we wanted to understand what applicants were doing before they came to us, what were they doing after, why were we making errors, and how could we provide better guidance without cluttering the form, because the form was already very, very cluttered. So we tried to make things better. So our context was working in a 3-month timeline, so it was really quite short for us. Usually we would take a couple months longer. Implementation focus, so we really wanted to get to a real solution for the team. So we didn't want to just say, well, we found out about user needs, here are some ideas. We wanted to get them somewhere where they would actually have a working prototype or an implemented prototype or an implemented service change. And for us, we were also working in different ways, so thinking about our approach. We were working in design sprints, so really trying to bring our project partners along, where every 2 weeks we were kind of sharing, this is what we've heard, this is the changes that we're making to the form. So we worked on developing a prototype form, and really we were able to show them every 2 weeks, these are the changes we've made. And so a really big piece of the work that we did was really trying to diversify and also kind of systemize how we did recruitment. And so within the BC government, gender-based analysis plus is a really topical piece of how government is trying to work and how government programs are trying to understand the people that they serve and be more inclusive to them. So this is a great opportunity for us to kind of take that theory and actually apply it, and bring the program area along to understand, well, like, what does gender-based analysis look like in our context? So for us, what the team did was kind of work through a diverse GBA Plus framework, where at first we acknowledged our biases and barriers and had a conversation around what are we bringing to the table, what assumptions are we bringing to the table. And then we worked with the disaggregated data. So big shout out to disaggregated data and having access to that. That it really allowed us to understand the people that were accessing the service and the challenges that they may have, and really what those attributes or barriers were. And from there, we were able to recruit and specifically kind of go after people that fit those attributes, and make sure that we were speaking to people that were born outside of Canada, or that may have been transitioning genders, or may have been divorced. So it allowed us to really make sure that we were representative of the people that were using the service. And so we did research with those participants to really understand what their challenges are and what their barriers were, and we used that to inform the design. So this is just an example of some of the personas that we worked with. So this really allowed us to kind of share with our program area and help them understand what are those kind of key users or key people that have challenges to accessing your service. So those are people that may have been transitioning gender, or wanting to reclaim their Indigenous name, or people that just had no understanding or expectation of what the service would even look like. And that really helped to kind of change the mind of our partner program area around, there was kind of this underlying assumption that people just wanted to change their name and that they should just expect that it will take a long time, or that, like, why didn't they give themselves more time? So we partnered with an organization called the Pay Society in Vancouver, which is a sex worker-driven organization, to really work with their participant base around what it was like. They ran actually a legal name change clinic for people under gender transition. So building those community partnerships. We also worked with the Native Friendship Center around people trying to reclaim their Indigenous names. And so really building those community partnerships and building that understanding for the organization around, this is the experience of people trying to access your service. So at the end of the day, we developed new web content and tested new web content. So structuring that information so it was easier to understand, and people had an expectation of how long it would take to access this service, what they would need, what to expect at the end of the day, that they wouldn't have a changed driver's license, they would just have kind of the next step in order to be able to go and do that. And then we prototyped a new digital form. So really using icons to help with being able to understand and to be able to quickly glance and see what was expected, progressive disclosure, so just a couple questions or one question per page that people could quickly go through, and using those tools to be able to reduce error rates and increase usability of the forms. And so, unfortunately, my story doesn't have like a perfectly happy ending. So I'll start from the bottom, actually, around a prototype doesn't actually equal changes to the service. So we built out a really great working prototype. We were able to show the use case of why investing in a digital form as opposed to trying to update an 11-page paper form, what the return investment was there, and then also what the increased usability was like for citizens. But we're still working with the IT department to try to get that as a priority at the top of their list. So recognizing that our team was not developing the new form, that we weren't in charge of the delivery of the new form. We were just trying to show what was possible. And in government and any other organizations, IT departments have, great lists and great backlogs of all the projects that are priority projects for the year. So we still have ongoing work to do to try and make sure that this project gets to the top of the list, hopefully this year or in coming years. But for us, kind of a really strong learning around implementation is a really key focus of our team. And so how do we learn where we got really close here, but we didn't maybe get the whole way? So what are those things that we need to do? Building and maintaining community relationships isn't easy. So we built some really great community relationships, and we were able to really reach some diverse user bases because of those community partnerships. But then we want to kind of transition those relationships to the program area, because ultimately they need to maintain them and they need to keep them going on to keep this work going. And that's always a tricky piece. And so it is something that you need to nurture and love and care for. And we're putting our trust in the program area that they will nurture it in a way that we would hope they would. The value of design sprints to bring teams along for the ride. So it was a really great experience for us just to be able to go back and bring in the team every 2 weeks and even more frequently than that. But to have them really understand what was going on, to have leadership really understand what was going on. So it wasn't kind of one big reveal at the end, but that we were able to course correct and incorporate their information as we went along. And then inclusive recruitment and research equals informed design decisions. I think that's a pretty, it's not really groundbreaking, but putting in the time to really be thoughtful about who you're speaking with and who actually the users are, as opposed to who's easy to go and speak with, makes a really big difference in the impact of the value of your design product at the end of the day. So just some takeaways from the project that we worked on, but happy to answer any questions on anything else. Yeah.